So I should just start off by saying, first of all, Guillermo, as I explained to the audience at the start, you're working on Frankenstein at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
You've got a whole lot of stuff in the can already, and you're flat out working at that. So it's such a thrill that you agreed to come and be with us today, and you kind of kept that commitment from so long ago. So thank you for being here.
No, thank you.
I want to talk about marketing in a moment, but just to sort of just start off with, just while we've got the guys with us. Ian, can I just ask you a little bit about, because obviously, you know, the puppets that we've seen on screen, there are lots of different sort of styles and, you know, in terms of sort of the artistry and the creativity goes into them, and they've got these kind of incredible metal armatures sort of underneath to make them kind of do the poses. Can you just tell us a little bit about that kind of process and the work that goes into creating them from sort of scratch, effectively?
Well, I think if we'd actually tried to make this film probably almost 18 years ago now, when we started talking about it, we wouldn't be able to give the animators, I don't know, the tools to do the performance. I think what developed over the last sort of 15, 16 years and the way that we've brought in technology to sort of enhance the traditional sort of techniques has been really, really helpful. And sort of, you know, so we have used 3D metal printing. I don't know, Pinocchio is the first 3D metal printed sort of stop motion armature. But it's also a nice sort of like the craftsmanship that went into this film from, I know, both in the UK, within Mexico, in I know, Portland. I know has been incredible, and to bring, and you know, this guy is the one, and Mark, who brought together such an incredible team of people, of artists around the world. So technology forms part of it, but I think the artistry and the sort of the way the design changed over the years as well, and it developed with the story, and I sort of so yeah, it was one of those projects that as soon as we heard about it, we thought this is one we have to do. So it was well worth the wait.
Yeah.
And Guillermo, I mean, McKinnon and Saunders, they really are, you know, the greats, aren't they? I mean, everybody goes to them, you know, for,
the best.
I mean, and that microphone actually probably should between them anyway. But what is it about them that makes them the best?
Well, first of all, animation is made by humans, and that's what makes it moving. And I think when you meet, you can have people that are good technicians, you can have people that care about pushing the technology forward, or you can have people that would be perfectly at home in a Renaissance workshop, and that's what they are. I mean, they are absolutely dedicated to their art and their craft and the artistry of it all. And, you know, it is meeting people that are not in it for growth, prestige, but anything but just giving their lives to something that is mostly forgotten by most of the world, which is what stop motion is. We keep it alive by pure stubbornness and sacrifice. And they are that. They are guardian angels of methodology, a technology, and a magic that is over 100 years old. And, you know, I think they are unique in the world. They are the best, and I will always work with them. Yeah.
And Frank, can I just ask you?
And the food is exceptional in their workshop. Cheese and onion sandwiches. I like them.
That is the Manchester way, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very Manchester.
And Frank, I wonder if you could just share with us. Obviously, this has been a real labour of love. This project. It's gone a very long journey. At what point did you kind of join this journey, and can you tell us a little bit about that kind of that period of time it took from, you know, the early days to getting it green list and actually made?
Yeah, because I was actually booked on another project, and I was clearing out my apartment in Portland, in Oregon. And I'd been working at like prior to that, I'd been offered Chicken Run 2, and so I was going to be traveling back. And then I got a phone call from Mark Gustafson, and I'd heard about Pinocchio being made for the last 10 years, and it was going to be made in Barcelona. It was New York, LA. And I thought, wherever that movie happens, God, I would really love to work on it. And I thought, there's probably no chance whatsoever. And so when I got that call, I was absolutely amazed. And of course, I said yes, but this isn't a done deal until I've met Guillermo, and because I know how particular he is about his colors, the way he uses his colors and everything. So I need to meet him, and we need to have a sort of talk first.
And presumably he was right to do that.
Oh yeah, we had a great talk.
We did have a great talk, yeah.
We didn't agree until the movie was done. it was like that scene in Sleeping Beauty, pink, blue, pink, all the way until the release of the movie, right? It was like, he would leave, I go this way.
Yeah.
And the color correction suite.
Because I met Guillermo for the first time it was in the Netflix building in LA, and it was in their sort of conference room. And the first thing he said to me, well, tell me a bit about your process. And so I began, I said, well, first thing I like to get closely involved in is the color script. And he kind of stopped me, leaned over the table towards me and said, not if I beat you to it. And I just laughed. And I said, but I believe it's a very important thing for the director of photography to be really involved in the colors of the movie. And because it brings all the emotive, the way it empowers every single sequence, it's very particular. So it's something that I like to be closely involved with. And then he said, absolutely, and I look forward to collaborating with you on that. And then I thought, God, I've got the job.
Before we kind of let you go back to your seats and we kind of keep Guillermo for an even deeper dive, we just thought it would be quite a nice thing if you're okay, because I know it's obviously very sad and a moving thing. The last time we were on this stage, certainly with Ian and Guillermo, we had Mark with you, which was January 23, and obviously Mark passed away in February this year. And on one hand, I think to remember that he was at the kind of top of his career at that point. He'd won the Oscar and all those other awards and made a film that was so well received and so loved. It was a really great thing on one hand in terms of his legacy, but obviously completely unexpected and a shock. And I just wonder, as we're kind of trying to make this sort of celebratory but also a kind of tribute to him, if I could perhaps just ask the three of you to sort of share some memories or something about Mark.
Mark was, I know we used the phrase, a titan of stop motion animation. He'd worked, hard for many years on incredible range of projects, and was very humble about it. He would never brag about it. He would never be the centre of attention, but he brought so much to the projects. And he was, I think everyone, he had incredibly dry wit. Everyone enjoyed his company, and he wanted to be part of a team. I think that was it. He was a real team player, and I think sometimes his work was a little bit overshadowed. And and I think what was so wonderful during the process of making, not just working with him, but then just seeing how the partnership between Guillermo and Mark developed and how they shared that. I know when the film was being released and they were going around, I know they spent so much time together. And that Guillermo, didn't have to share that with him, but I know you did, and gladly, because Mark's work. It's so intertwined, everything. It's so beautiful to see the film tonight. I think it was great that was, a high note. When you were at Air Studios, a few months before the film was finished, and we went to see the recording, and Alexander's up there conducting with, and Mark and Peter and I were sat on a sofa in front of an 80-piece orchestra, watching our puppets animating to this 80-piece orchestra, and Mark and I looked at each other, and he just said, "It doesn't get any better than this." No. And I think this film has touched us for many reasons, for loss and grief. We've all lost people during the production, and it's incredibly sensitive the way it deals with. It's amazing that we've got this legacy now of Mark's work, and for the future.
Yeah, and it was amazing for me. I had not seen Mark for 10 years, and then after I had that phone call, I saw him, and just immediately I knew we were very sympathetic to each other's ideas, and I just immediately from the first minute working with Mark, we just got on so well together. And, well, with both Guillermo and Mark, they're such true collaborators. And both of them know so much about cinematography. And so there was a brilliant mutual trust, I think, that was built up between us. And I think that, you know, there were no barriers to be sort of broken down. It was like we could sort of expand the vision of Mark and sort of Guillermo, and really sort of bring to fruition, you know, what this movie really needed to be.
I mean, the reason I'm here is because I said I would be here, number one, and the second one because of Mark, because I lost two people in this movie, my mother and Mark. And, you know, I didn't have a chance to say goodbye to either of them. With Mark, it was so sudden, so out of the blue. And when his service happened, I was in pre-production on Frankenstein. I couldn't leave. I was in Toronto. The clock was ticking. And I felt this would be my chance to say him how much I love him and say goodbye. And it is, Mark was a curious fellow. I mean, he's a Nordic guy and a Mexican. It's a bad combination, but one that is a yin and a yang, you know. I go straight to the point every time. I don't mince words. You can read where I am in 2 seconds. I'm angry, I'm happy. And Mark had the most gentle heart and the most savage mind. His wit was so dry, you needed like a loofah to exfoliate. By comparison, I never saw anyone understand and empathize with anybody else's problems more than him. And what Ian says is true. It was his first directorial credit on a feature. And when we started the process, I said, I want you to have this credit because we will co-direct. You know, you're going to be on the field. And even although we're going to green light and direct every shot together, you're going to be there. And a lot of the times that happens and they get animation director credit. I said, that's not what I want. I want you to be, and not co-director, director. That's very important. It's not I co-directed, we directed together. And the fact that, if for those of you that don't know, Mark is one of the founding pillars of claymation, along with Will Vinton, early in the days. And when you say a titan, he was a titan of stop motion. And for so many years, and everybody loved and cherished his guidance or his friendship or and this was at first, we had to drag him out into the limelight, and then he liked it, you know, and it was great to see him enjoy it. And enjoy that moment. And here's tonight a moment where we dedicate tonight's event and us being here to the memory of Mark Gustafsson, who was the best partner, one of the great animators, and one of the great human beings you can ever meet. So it's here. Yeah. The only time when he was horrible was when we got trapped in an elevator in a cinema nearby. I think it was Charles Cinema or something, and he escaped like a rat. As soon as the doors opened a little, I opened them, and he went. I was turning to say, Mark, you can leave if you. That's the only time.
Survival's an instinct, isn't it?
He didn't want to stay, and I normally don't want to move. I can stay in one place for hours, no problem. So I stayed, had a bucket of popcorn, and waited until the elevator was on stock.
That's fantastic. Ian and Frank, thank you so much. I'm going to let you take your seats again, but thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it. So just to sort of touch on Frankenstein for a moment. I know obviously at the moment, despite talking about Pinocchio now, you're consumed with everything to do with Frankenstein because that's the film you're making right now. Yeah. But in fact, there is a kind of parallel. Yeah. It's almost like they're the sort of two parts of the same film in lots of respects. And I just wonder, I mean, that irony is obviously not lost on you because they're both two of your they've both been titles that you've kind of often talked about in your whole career.
Yeah,
And
no,
how
I've
you
been
finally made
wanting
them.
to make them both for decades. The Pinocchio I wanted to make back in the 90s was a lot of what I wanted to do with Pinocchio permeated Pan's Labyrinth and Devil's Backbone, and then they became sort of sibling movies to this Pinocchio in a way. And Frankenstein, there was a point in the 2000s when I realized it's the same story. It's different versions of a similar story. So it's an interesting exercise how they come together. David Bradley, who plays Geppetto, plays the blind man in Frankenstein. There are moments that are similar. There's a lot of Catholicism on both, you know, and to be able to do both of them one after the other is really, really has been very moving. And with Frankenstein, I'm having a really very visceral relationship with the movie. I'm having something that happened once in Pan's Labyrinth and happened once in Shape of Water, but I'm having it very often, which is I actually get sort of physically, I feel like I'm going to faint when I'm seeing certain things happen in front of me. I don't know how to explain it. Like the back of my neck and the back of my knees go weak.
I guess you've been imagining it for such a long time as well.
I just don't know what it is. It's just I feel like I'm going to faint on the set. Not after lunch. I feel good after that. but it is something. I mean, they are so much intrinsic to my soul, both movies, and I think they are sort of the two of them are my reflective of what I think is fatherhood, or being a son, or being a father, or how you pass the pain from one to another, and how it can maybe one day be solved. And the two movies will go together very nicely there. I wanted very much Geppetto to be, because all the Pinocchios that Geppetto was so nice. And I said, this guy has to be a really bad father. Nice man, bad father, which can happen.
And I guess the thing about both stories in a way is that I guess fathers always kind of want perfection. They always strive perfection for their children. But children are flawed characters, as we all are. Mm-hmm. And Pinocchio is a flawed character. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah.
But he needs to make his own mistakes, and he needs to do it, do them himself, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, I've been trying to tell one version of this story. You can see it on Hellboy 2, on Blade 2, on, you name it. It is there, and it is because I think I find the notion of perfection is so alarming and such a horrible. The two worst myths, I think, are romantic love and perfection. They're horrifying because they create standards that make everybody suffer for things that have very little to do with the real world. And we are in a spasm as a culture. We are in a spasm of perfection, where we demand things to either be the greatest or the worst, evil or good. We have turned into 5-year-olds, and we are in a tantrum. And I really worry about just saying, look, the same guy that may have robbed a bank may save another prisoner if the prison catches fire. It's the same guy. Why can you not be an asshole at 8:30 and a great guy at 11 o'clock? Why can't we do that? And parenthood is a similar thing because the father or the mother, the parent is a giant shadow that you cannot humanize that easily. I did with my father before he passed, and I did with my mother before she passed. When she passed, I had been, during her illness, I had been in the color correction suite. And I said, she's dying, she may die, and I'm here dialing these knobs. And I was at peace with that because my mother and I were both adults. We had said everything we had to say. I had nothing pending. I didn't have to make peace with her. She didn't have to say something. the last conversation I had with her, she said, okay, I'm hanging up because I'm going to lunch. I said, that's my mom. You know? But my father took a lot longer to decipher, and I don't think I ever cracked him, you know. And the movies question the things I question, and they also question what it is to be.
And interestingly, because this is a film we're showing in the context of a big stop motion kind of celebration, in a way this conversation is quite interesting because I guess, you know, CGI, I guess, is ultimately about the kind of the striving. I mean, initially it was about striving for perfection. It was about creating a world, and I know that's maybe changed as the technologies evolved, but it was always about trying to recreate, you know, real life to an extent.
Yeah. Well,
and the thing that stop motion does so brilliantly actually is it's about kind of almost celebrating those imperfections as well, because actually you feel the humanity flowing through those characters, and you're not trying to cover up and make everything perfect.
No, Mark used to talk about how Wes Anderson and him came up with the term mystery wind for when the fur of Mr. Fox would move. And they said we have to embrace it because it's part of, like when I was a kid, I knew Harryhausen's models were this big, but not on the screen. On the screen, they were Talos or the Cyclops. They were alive, and that's the magic of it. I think technologically, the stop motion has pushed so far that it can eerily become CG in some aspects of it, and we seek to not do that. The majority of the puppets were had robotic faces so that the animator could move them, and this was something that was clear on the beginning. We didn't want to print the faces if we could. So the majority of the puppets have mechanics inside so that the connection between the animator and the puppet is intimate. If it raises an eyebrow, and you know, you were in every turnover we did with the animators, we would say, do this, do that. We would go into, and then we would say, but if you find something else, just do it. Don't ask permission. You're alone with the puppet, it's you. It's like between action and cut, the actor is the author of the movie. Why not do that with the animator? Why feel that they are using face A, B, 2 with mouth C, D, 1? Give them the control of the entire puppet, and we wanted to do that. Imperfection is the nature of art, I think. I think the symmetry is a very dictatorial thing to have. I think that the brushstroke of Van Gogh, which he got from the brushstroke of an engraving or a painting in Japan, you understand that the pulse of the painter and the brush is what makes it moving. And the same is true with animation. I think that animation needs to be done by hand. There is all this fear, and I do think animation is one of the few disciplines that is in danger of the way AI is being presented. I think AI is like Bitcoin. I think it's not going to be what it's going to be, what people think it's going to be. At the same time, unfortunately, because it's not being put in the hands of the artist, but bypassing the artist to be put in the hands of the bean counters, it will likely be misused before it's used correctly, if ever. So, you know, an animation, I think that they can try to fire the in-betweeners. And if you lose the pencil or you lose the in-betweening, if it doesn't go through 3 hands, you lose something. You lose 2 of the hands that did it. I think there's some, I try to make my movies handmade. With Frankenstein, we built every goddamn set. Every goddamn set where, well, you could do this. No, we're building it. And we build them giant and extravagant and beautiful and crazy. We build miniatures, physical miniatures. We build everything because I think there is a difference. I think the audience can tell that people were involved. And I said the other day, I sent a message to the animators standing up for their negotiation. I said, art is not a commodity, it's a human right. You know, and I believe it. I think that if the industry may treat it like a commodity, and we have to fight because it is what makes us human. If we relinquish that single thing, we're relinquishing the entirety of our spirit, you know?
And when you were last here, you talked on this stage, but also kind of globally, it seems, about the kind of animation for adults. That was your kind of mantra.
Yeah.
And I wonder, now kind of 18 months after the Oscars, or however long it was, whether you feel that there's more understanding and that there's more kind of out there in that respect.
The first 3 things that happened after winning the Oscar was they canceled 3 of my projects.
Which doesn't make sense, does it?
No,
I mean, Pinocchio, in terms of,
it
even though
does,
it
it
was
does.
made for Netflix, Pinocchio made like 3 times its budget.
It is not. It's not. I think the industry went to the most conservative place it's been in the last 15 years. It retracted brutally, because when they lost certain bets that the companies did, they retracted. They're going to something that they think is safe, but that is a myth. It's a myth. When they say, well, we're going to do 4-quadrant movies that appeal to the whole family, I say, yeah, and I'm going to dance like John Travolta. I can't. I can't. You don't decree that shit. You don't decree it. It's not something you wish. You don't feel an order in a catalog. It comes from art. And I see each of the bastions of animation has fallen back, most of them, not all of them, but most of them have fallen back to conservative, to being really, really as conservative as you can. And I think it's a very dangerous moment for animation. Very dangerous, because it's one of the arts that people, the moment the term computer animation was used, is the moment most of the people think the computers make the animation. So it's a tremendous misnomer, right? But it permeated everything. It permeated the conception. When I saw a demo of AI, and I thought, oh, that's what people think animation is, giving prompts and the computer does it. But AI has demonstrated that it can do semi-compelling screensavers. That's essentially that. And I think the value of art is not how much it costs and how little effort it requires, is how much would you risk to be in its presence. What would you do to be in the presence of Starry Night at the Musée d'Orsay? Would you go to Paris? Yes. Would you stand in line for 3 hours? Yes. And then you would have 5 minutes in which you will be monumentally moved by that, So how much would people pay for those screensavers? Are they going to make them cry because they lost a son, a mother, because they misspent their youth? Fuck no. No, it's not going to happen. But that's going to take some years to find out. And in the meantime, they're in the hands of people that don't think about it as a tool, but as a solution. That's like asking a monkey wrench to build you a garage. F that, it's impossible. You cannot grab the monkey wrench and say, okay, fix my toilet. It's a tool. It's a tool, and not a tool that should be in the hands of anyone, but it should be, if at all, optional and in the hands of the artist.
And does that affect the project that you were planning to make with Kazuo Ishiguro, the Buried Giant?
I'm gonna make it.
Because that is a stop-motion project.
Yeah, I'm gonna make it. And I mean, I want that to be my next stop-motion movie. I want it to be, whether somebody immediate wants to make it or not, I'm gonna make it. If I have any strength in my body and any chance to do it in any capacity, way, or form, it is going to happen, because it's an incredibly important story about something that is very dear to me, which is memory. Memory and forgiving. Forgetting and forgiving are two things that are interrelated, but not necessarily equivalent. And sometimes to forget is actually the greatest punishment, as opposed to the great pardon. And the novel analyzes that. And I want to do it because of that. And I want to do it in stop motion because I have very pointed reasons to make that world. I don't want 2 actors in a world where there are giants and dragons and cockatrices and creatures that are solved by makeup or CG. I want them to exist in the same reality. The humans are going to be animated and the creatures are going to be animated, so they're going to be of a piece. It's the same decision why Pinocchio had to be stop motion, because the uncanny valley of that story is Pinocchio. You know, if you see humans and a puppet, is the uncanny valley is enormous. But if the humans are puppets and the puppet is a puppet that doesn't want to obey and act like a puppet, that alone gives the story 60 more meanings. That is what interested me.
And before we go back to a bit more detail on Pinocchio again,
I don't even remember what you asked.
well, no, you answered it beautifully. When you were kind of growing up and creating your own animations, because obviously animation was something that you were kind of completely part of your life when you were growing up.
Yeah.
Is it right that your first feature at one point was going to be a stop motion
Yeah,
animation?
it was. It was a movie called Omnivore, and I was early on my 20s. We fabricated all the puppets. We fabricated a few of the sets, 120 puppets in clay.
Wow.
We did the armatures, everything. I shot and animated the first minute. It was an old man waking up and sighing and extending his arms. And my partner and I, my animation partner and I, we went to my parents' house to watch Viridiana. It was going to play on TV, Buñuel. And when we came back, they had broken into the lab, destroyed all the puppets, defecated and pissed. I thought, well, that's an auspicious end. I better go to live action. But it prepared me for the Weinsteins when I did Mimic. You know, but you know, it was. I made the first stop motion company in my city, and the animators that are animating in my city for decades animated with the equipment I had. It was a Mitchell NC, an Ingenue Zoom, and I did consoles and lights handmade. We had to make them because I lived in Guadalajara and it was its second city in Mexico. So I said, we're not renting them, we're fabricating these lights. And we made them. They were not great, but they were ours.
We did a documentary from Mexico last weekend, and we had a couple of filmmakers on this very stage, literally this time last week pretty much, talking about actually making this film, but they talked about the importance of you and your contribution in Mexico and how people in the film industry in Mexico view you. And they were talking about the stop motion studio that you created in Mexico. And was that already in existence, or was that created for Pinocchio?
I created it for the short, for the movie, and then they used it for short films. We had two Mitchells, one older, one of them was a Mitchell camera that Gabriel Figueroa shot La Perla with one of the early movies, and we revered it, and we could repair them because the Mitchells are like a BW Beetle. You can get in there and repair them, you know, and then when we were gonna make Pinocchio, all these animators, I said, let's create part of it in Mexico, in my hometown, and we created an animation studio to do the Black Rabbits sequence that is there. Is animated in Mexico, and it's been 7-8 years. I have had a scholarship that I co-found with a distribution company in Mexico, and every year we have sent about 10 filmmakers to study animation to Paris in Gobelin, the school, and we pay for their tickets, their food, their lodging, their materials, and their education. And we basically have done that now with, I think, 10 filmmakers for 8 years. We're going to continue for another decade, and it's entirely. I went to this distribution company and I said, look, I'm not a billionaire. I'm going to put 50%. Would you put 50%? And they agreed, and it comes. And every time I meet, and 2 or 3 times, our animators have now been selected or pre-selected for Oscars and students' Oscars. Wow. Coming out of that education, because I believe that when you change one life, you change a generation. I think that young people, especially now, is so hopeless. It's so hopeless because we f***ed up everything up, right? And it is our minute duty to try to make some stuff better. And I intend, my next project is to create a stop-motion animation studio in the school in Paris in exchange for them to cover scholarships for more students to study stop motion, which is not taught in the school right now. They teach 2D and CG and all that, and I want stop motion to do that. The biggest studio in Mexico that does stop motion, I was their godfather when they're doing their first short. They were 10 or 15,000 short to complete it, and I contact them through Twitter, and I send them the money.
Wow.
And now they are really successful. They have a great animation studio. They do a series for HBO, and they do it for the love of it.
And you talked a little bit about some of the decisions around Pinocchio, but obviously one of the crucial things, obviously it was written by Carlo Collodi in the, I think, 1880s, and what you did was you kind of moved it to that period between the First and Second World War. We learn about how Geppetto's son died in that kind of period, the end of the First World War. And you obviously bring in, you set in fascist Italy, you bring in Mussolini as an actual character.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us a little bit about that sort of that thought process?
Yeah, the thing that I wanted to do from the beginning, when I was very young, I said I wanted to juxtapose fantasy being alive in a world as crazy as the one we live in, and to juxtapose enormous things that conspire to destroy imagination or beauty or imperfection, and I always thought it was very illuminating to do Pinocchio. Pinocchio is born out of the moment where the unification of Italy is important. It's important to say, don't be disobedient to your parents. And my favorite thing is disobedience. I like it. I think we should all be disobedient. I think that obedience is not a virtue, it's a condition and a slavish stupidity. Accepting somebody else's truth without testing it is the worst thing you can do to your soul. So I wanted the virtue of Pinocchio to be the opposite of the Collodi virtue, which is enthroning disobedience. And I thought that's the perfect time to try to disobey at your own peril, which is this time.
And the whole thing about puppets and so forth as well, I guess.
Yeah, and
it's
it's not about Mussolini, it's about now. It's about today. It's about, I remember when I did Pan's Labyrinth, somebody said, well, isn't it easy to talk about fascism when it is not that imperative right now? And I said, it's like bell-bottom pants. It comes back. Just wait enough. It's come back into fashion. And sadly enough, it is true. It comes back. It's never fully away. It always is there's a compulsion for people to blame. When people blame, they like to look down. They don't like to look up. The motherfuckers that destroy everything are up there, not down there. But we prefer to look around and down and say, oh yeah, this person or this is what destroyed my life. No, it comes from above. It always comes from above. And it's easy to manipulate because it's division, it's us and them, and it's about, in the world we have two choices. I think when we hate is a mirror, when we love is a window, and people become windows or mirrors according to what we need. And that's the essence of fascism. If they say, no, look at those guys. Those are the ones you gotta blame. Oh, that's true. And it's not, it's an illusion. And I thought, can we do it? Normally Geppetto is the one that teaches Pinocchio how to be a real boy. And I wanted Pinocchio to teach Geppetto how to be a real father.
And it feels like in Mexican culture and Mexican cinema, and this is something you sort of seem to embrace yourself, there's a very particular, maybe positive relationship with death, if you like.
Yeah, I like that.
And in the film, we actually see the sort of personification. Death is a character.
Yeah. No, when I was writing with Patrick McHale, I said I want life to be very irresponsible. Like she just goes, oh, come alive. She doesn't measure any consequences. But death is actually a good teacher. Death takes the time to sit Pinocchio down and say, listen, you need to make a decision. Listen, this is not that easy. Death teaches all of us how to be human. I really believe it. I'm not, I haven't gone through it. I'll let you know how it goes. But I think that death is the metronome for existing. You know, without it, it's impossible to exist. You know, we can only exist in a finite. I think when people talk about no boundaries is impossible. The secret of boundaries is not to mind them. When I did Kronos, I said the only immortal character is the little girl, not because she will not die, but because she does not care about dying. Immortality is not dying, it's living. Immortality is living, period. And the same issues are addressed in Frankenstein in a different way. I mean, when you see it, I saw it already. You know, when you see it, you will see these concerns again. And they are in some of the other movies.
And in terms of the actual process of designing what death is going to look like and giving that challenge to the artist, how much direction did you give them?
It's a purely Mexican death. I mean, the death is like a Mexican sculpture in this movie. It comes from the old colonial churches in Mexico, and in old, really early Judeo-Christian iconography, archangels and angels have eyes on their wings, on each of the feathers. And I saw that in a church when I was a kid, and there's an ornamental quality to the creature that is extremely, and they could be hand-carved in Mexico. They could be an alebrije from Oaxaca or Michoacan, you know. I wanted them to be beautiful, but clearly not of this world. You know, they have to have majesty. And very early on, I thought their faces, they are sisters, so their faces are very similar. And right now I'm working with an animator in Mexico on a story for stop motion called Maria y la Muerte, Maria and the Death. And the ending, which we came up with the other day, is talking about that. There's death is the sister of life, and there is the poem that I quoted many times on this movie, which Sabines, a great poet from Mexico, used to say, all of my life a voice has told me quietly on my ear, live, live, it was death. You know, and I think there is a very Mexican relationship with death, and a very Mexican philosophy about it. You know, and I think that the part of me that is that celebrates that understands that we should never know what happened to Pinocchio. I remember when the studio, I mean, I remember when I said Mark said, you don't want anything to stay alive. When I said the pine cone should fall, and Mark says, God damn it, you don't want anything to be alive. When I was at DreamWorks for about a decade, Jeffrey Katzenberg said, the amount of characters that have died since you joined have tripled. Because I was with, when we were talking about How to Train Your Dragon, and they said, what do we do with the father? I said, kill him. Kill him. You know, first of all, because I think, by the way, I think animation should exist for all publics, but if it is to be something that kids watch, let's at least have worthy discussions with the kids and not give them emotional and existential pornography that is entirely false, where everything is gonna, you know, let's talk about things that don't go quite right. And you know, Disney understood it a little better. When people say, oh, the Disneyfication, you know, Disney had a lot of darkness.
Well,
understood
Pinocchio
that.
included. I mean, Pinocchio is one of the darkest films I've ever seen. It still gives me nightmares when I think about it. You know?
I was with Quentin Tarantino when he said, the most violent movie I've ever seen in my life is Bambi. That is the only movie where I ran out of the theater crying.
But in the Disney Pinocchio, you know, the boys are turned into donkeys. There's no reprieve for them. They don't come back. They get sent off to the salt mines, and you never see them again. They are donkeys.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty hard, isn't it?
Well, you know, fables and fairy tales serve only two functions: to domesticate the kids or to liberate the kids. That's it. So the fables that say, obey your parents and do not go into the woods are constrictive. And the ones that say there are things in the woods that are part of this world and you should follow your heart, that's a different fairy tale. I happen to favor that one. But the general fairy tale is a repression, a parable of repression that says, behave. Your parents know best. You know, I got to tell you, they don't. We don't. We are, you know, I'm Guillermo, I'm not a dad, but I play the role of a dad now. I mean, I've turned into a reasonably good dad, you know, but you have to learn it. And I like that idea of these stories being complex. I think kids should learn about these things, not in a terrible way, but in a way. My great uncle died when I was 4, and I couldn't understand what had happened. All I understood is that I didn't have to go to school, and nobody sat me down and said, "You're never going to see him again." I had to have that realization on my own. I'd rather have that chat with my parents. So, yeah, I think that is very useful because you know what? Everybody gets it. I mean, I remember allegedly the last words Steve Jobs said was, he said, "Wow," and then he went away. And I think it's a mystery that makes us humble. Fantasy and the sublime humble your heart into accepting that the universe is mystery.
And tell us a little bit about Gregory Mann, who voiced Pinocchio, because obviously you create these incredible puppets, and then you have to find actors of a quality because they've got to express the acting and everything. They haven't got their hands and their body to do it. Everything has to go through the voice.
Yeah.
And you found somebody pretty incredible there.
Yeah, Mark and I agreed on Gregory in 2 seconds. It's not that he was the best, he was the only one. And that happens, I've done many movies with kids, and you get 200 horrible kids and one genius, one that is perfect, you know? And the key to those things is 2 things. One, never treat them like kid actors. Treat them like actors. Respect their intelligence and explain to them the way you would explain to a 40-year-old actor. This is what we need. And know that their attention span is this much. So you're gonna get very little every day. So he would arrive and we would say, look, let's do the first hour and then there will be sushi. And he would then stay focused for an hour until the sushi arrived, and then basically the day was over. You know, we would bring David Bradley for them to record together now and then, but then eventually you lose him, you know. I remember I used to sit in the back with Jeffrey Katzenberg on the DreamWorks screenings. I said, why do you sit in the back? And he said, I wait, and if more than 5 heads go like this, I make a note. And, you know, the attention span is not the same, but Gregory was exactly Pinocchio. And that's the thing, you cast essence. You cast actors that have something of the character in them, whether they know it or not. You know, you sit down and you have a long talk about them and what they like, what they want to do. And the first question I ask a kid actor is, what do you want to do when you grow up? If they say anything but actor,
They're gone.
yeah.
And David Bradley is an interesting actor as well, because he's kind of loved and respected, and people are in awe of him. But he does that kind of curmudgeonly kind of character very well. And as you said before, that's not the Geppetto necessarily that people expect, you know. And the fact that you've brought him back to Frankenstein, I think, is interesting. Obviously, there's obviously a connection there that you feel.
This is my 4th project with him. We started on The Strain, then we did Troll Hunters, then we did Pinocchio, and now we're doing Frankenstein. So we're good friends. And I absolutely adore him. You know, he's really, first of all, he's a great actor. He's worked with everybody. He was in Royal Shakespeare Company. He's come along, John Hurt, met Olivier. This is a proper great actor, but the most humble man and the most sweet man. When we did The Strain for several years in Toronto, he came back to do Frankenstein. He had groupies. Like the entire crew was just tending to him. And we adore each other. I think that if you're lucky as an adult, you get 2 families. The family you're born with and the family you make, and in the respective to the craft of filmmaking, you become family, and then you don't see each other for 25 years, and then you meet again, and it's like what happened to you and Mark. You hadn't seen each other for 10 years. You clicked like this as soon as you were together, you know?
And the other kind of big collaborator on this project is Alexandre Desplat,
Yeah.
who
And Christoph Waltz,
of course,
who is
back again.
now in Frankenstein too.
That's true. But tell us about Alexandre Desplat and his incredible music.
Well, Alexander I admire him. This is also our fourth project together, and he is really good at emotion. And I think when I go to him, I sit and I say, he says, I'm going to play a few things, and if I don't feel the emotion, I said, no, it doesn't work. I have to feel that emotion. And for example, I cut the movies in silence. In live action, certainly here we had to have it because we often would send the animatics to the studio to see the progress. But normally I cut without score. I think it's a big mistake to cut with a score. And that way I'm completely empty of what it needs to be for when Alexander comes in. And he sits at the piano and he plays the main theme of Pinocchio, and I started crying. And I said, that's it, you know? And he is brilliant, and he knows it, and he's French, and he knows it. And he's incredibly charming and a genius, and it's a very easy collaboration. What was interesting was when we wrote the songs together, because I wrote the first one. We originally had contacted Nick Cave for the first version of the movie, the one that different screenplay, Chris Grimley was going to direct, and we went to Nick Cave, and Nick Cave came and met, and I was all in awe because he's a rock star and all. I was like, oh my God, I'm meeting royalty, right? Didn't happen. That version got scraped. We kept the Fox and Pinocchio, and I think maybe one more design, and then we started from scratch. And then we said, let's go to Beck. And we had 2 meetings with Beck. And it was so hard to schedule a meeting with Beck that we said, how are we going to work? And I said to Alexander, do you mind if I try my hand at lyrics? And I said, I'm cheap and I'm available. And I did. I wrote my son in one sitting, and I sent it. And all of a sudden, I bought a new scarf, and I said, I'm a lyricist. And then, very shortly, it was very clear, I'm not. So we would come up with the main, like certain phrases, ciao papa, or when will I see you, who will know, or this or that. But Katz, the co-lyricist, is really the guy that created the lyrics. I mean, I came up with a few silly notions there, here and there. And the same thing happened. I mean, we're writing with Gustavo Santaolalla and Paul Williams. We've been developing a musical of Pan's Labyrinth for the last 7 years. And Paul also has told me very clearly I'm not a lyricist, in spite of my credits.
And we're kind of running out of time, I'm afraid, again. But you create this incredible world. It's a stop motion world with these incredible puppets and the voices and the music. And they're all very naturalistic. They're all doing things that you don't normally see puppets doing, like itching or coughing or whatever it might be. But the other thing, I guess, that we should probably just talk about a little bit is what the sort of the digital world allows you to do, because there are some things that actually are such a sort of a stop motion challenge that digital will allow you to elevate that. I'm thinking like the oceans and stuff. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about that kind of that thought process about what you were going to bring in digitally.
Yeah, I think that the first part of it, we started on Troll Hunters. We started animating mistakes. And this comes from a thing Jim Cameron once told me when he was showing, we were looking at Terminator 2. And we were looking at the shot of the Terminator breaking through the windshield. And he says, what do you think sells it? And I said, well, the camera is doing this and that. He said, no, it's the flare. It's the flare of the lens that tells you it's a situation that is happening and you don't control it. He says, you should build mistakes into an effect. And I remember that. I mean, we've been friends for 30-something years, and I had just finished Kronos, and I went, make mistakes. And that philosophy, as I started to try it in animation in Troll Hunters, I said, why do we have, and it came from Miyazaki. Miyazaki calls it ma. And if you see Totoro, the father, when he puts his shoe on, he fails a couple of times and then puts the shoe on. In American movies, they just put the shoe on. And I said, let's make those mistakes to allow people to start seeing them, because they cost money. What I mean is the studio goes, why don't you animate 2 more shots that day? And you go, because we're going to do these mistakes, and you have to stand by that. As far as the digital, my discipline for more than 10 years was animation, opticals, effects. I knew how to do composites. I knew how to do this and that, makeup effects. And I'm very, very comfortable directing digital effects and even compositing in the color correction suite, right, at the last moment, because I think they need to look integrated with the stop motion in this case. So we spent a good deal. Brian Leaf Hansen, our animation director, is a genius, and he is like the 4th musketeer. Like I think he's brilliant, and he defended to do everything stop motion that we could do stop motion. But when you do an ocean and you do real water dynamics, unless you have $150 million. Now this movie cost roughly about 1/3 of what a big stop motion movie costs. So we understand each other. It's like 3 times less than the other that will go into your mind, and you can think about them. They are far more expensive. So we couldn't do that. So Brian and the studio in Mr. X in Toronto, we did studies. He would do an animation, a test, and they would reproduce it in digital to look like stop motion. So our directing the water, our directing the clouds, when we started to talk, I sent everybody images of the symbolists, the transcendental landscapists in Canada, because they do great clouds, and we would reference painters, say, let's try to art direct it that way. Art directing is directing. And there's no difference between visual and content, or story and visual, whatever you want to call it. It's one and the same. It's not for something to look good, it's for something to tell the story right. And the reason Frank was saying what he said is because in reality, in a good movie, there is no art direction, cinematography, wardrobe. It's a single thing. And it should all be discussed together. It's 4 legs of the same table. You cannot have them going in different directions. They need to be unified. And the director does 2 things: guide and provoke that to be discussed and in the right manner. And the other thing that a director does is quietly act like the force of gravity. You may not notice when you're doing it, but you notice if you stop doing it. Everybody starts floating into space in different directions, but you are like the ultimate force of gravity to say that. And if you do your job right, everybody in the movie owns the movie. It's not just your movie. Everybody will say, have you seen my movie Pinocchio? Whether they were sculpting a set or animating a puppet or doing anything, your hope as a director is to inspire all of them to say my movie and to find the biography, their autobiography in something they did for that movie. So that's one of the best ways to achieve that is by discussing the unification of all those things through art direction, and digital effects needed that, because the worst thing you can do to a group of animators is to say, and then digital will come, as opposed to let's guide digital into our turf so that they don't f it up. That's the discussion.
So I think we could have talked for 8 hours. We wouldn't even scratch the surface.
Yeah, but they have babysitters and parking tickets.
Exactly. So I sadly, I should say thank you to Frank and Ian, who came and very dutifully joined us at the start. But a huge thank you. Yeah, of course. I have to say we've got Mo Sutton here in the audience who's going to be doing an event with us at the end of September. She just presented Guillermo a copy of her book before, her new book, which she wrote with her husband Richard Williams, which I know he's very thrilled with. So we say great that we've got Mo here today as well.
And I think that believe it or not, you guys showing up for every movie on this stop motion moment that the BFI has the wisdom to have created, and talking about it, it does a lot to keep it alive. Like, don't stop discussing it. Don't stop. Each of you is now an evangelist for a doomed religion. So please go out and proselytize so that we can still exist in the future.
Guillermo del Toro, thank you so much.